Have you ever heard the whispers of an old African market, where stories are not just told, but lived, where the air is thick with the scent of spices, the sound of bargaining, and sometimes a touch of magic? Tonight, I want to take you to one such place. A village nestled between golden hills, where a market comes alive under the full moon. It was a place of vibrant trade. But on one particular night, something ancient and powerful slithered among the stalls, searching for a heart filled with greed. In the bustling heart of this very market, there was a man named Kofi. Now, Kofi wasn't just any trader. He was a master of deceit. His reputation for cheating was as well known as the market itself. He'd use fake weights to shortchange his customers, sell broken pots as if they were brand new, and pass off spoiled food with a charming smile. And yet, despite his dishonesty, his pile of gold grew higher with each setting sun. He was a rich man, but his wealth was built on the misfortune of others. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky and the market began to wind down, a figure emerged from the thinning crowd. It was an old woman, her clothes torn and her face etched with the lines of a long, hard life. In her hands, she clutched a small, unassuming clay pot. She approached Kofi's stall, her steps slow and deliberate. "Good evening, my son," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Please, would you mind if I rested this pot here for just a moment? My journey has been long, and my arms are weary." Kofi, busy counting his coins, barely looked up. He scoffed, his voice dripping with annoyance. "Do what you want, old woman," he grumbled. "Just make sure you don't block my customers. I'm not running a resting stop here." He turned his back to her, dismissing her as if she were nothing more than a fly buzzing around his precious goods. The old woman simply smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned in closer and whispered, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves, "Be kind to what you do not understand, my son." And just like that, before Kofi could even turn around to snap at her again, she was gone. She had vanished into the shadows of the closing market, leaving only the small clay pot behind on his counter. As the last of the merchants packed up their wares and the moon climbed high into the night sky, Kofi finally finished his work. He locked his coin box and began to tidy his stall. That's when his eyes fell upon the pot the old woman had left. It was no longer a simple piece of clay. A faint, otherworldly light was pulsating from within, casting strange, dancing shadows around his stall. It seemed to hum with a secret energy. Kofi's greed was legendary, but so was his curiosity. What could be inside? Gold, jewels, some forgotten treasure. The thought made his heart beat faster. He forgot the old woman's warning, forgot everything but the possibility of more wealth. With trembling hands, he reached out and slowly, carefully, lifted the lid. The moment the lid was ajar, a deafening hiss ripped through the silence of the night market. A massive, jet-black snake, thicker than a man's arm, shot out of the pot. It coiled itself up on the counter, its body seeming to absorb the moonlight. Its scales shimmered like polished obsidian, and its eyes burned like two hot coals, staring directly into Kofi's soul. A deep, echoing voice filled the air, a voice that seemed to come from the very earth beneath him. "You have cheated many, Kofi," the snake boomed. "You have built your fortune on lies and stolen the bread from the mouths of the hungry. Tonight, your greed meets its end." Kofi collapsed to his knees, the color draining from his face. All his bravado, all his arrogance, evaporated in an instant. He was face to face with a power he could not comprehend, and terror seized him completely. "Please," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. "Forgive me. I didn't know what was in the pot." The snake's fiery eyes narrowed. "You knew," it hissed, the sound slithering into Kofi's mind. "You knew with every customer you cheated, with every false weight you used. You knew, but he did not care. Your heart was closed to everything but the clink of coins." Kofi began to sob, his body shaking uncontrollably. He was certain his life was over. The snake watched him for a long, silent moment, its head swaying back and forth. Still, the voice echoed again. "I will offer you one choice, One path to redemption. Kofi looked up, a sliver of hope piercing his terror. Anything, he cried. I'll do anything. Share your wealth, the snake commanded. Return what you have stolen. Give to those you have cheated, to the poor you have ignored. You must empty your coffers and fill the bowls of the needy. Do this, and you may live. Refuse or hesitate, and I will be here to visit you. Every single night until you do. With that final, chilling promise, the snake flowed back into the pot as quickly as it had appeared. The lid snapped shut, the glow vanished, and the pot became nothing more than a simple piece of clay once more. The next morning, the market was abuzz with anticipation. Kofi was always the first to open his stall, eager to start his day of swindling. But today, his stall remained closed. The villagers whispered amongst themselves. Where was the greedy trader? Had something happened? Finally, just as the sun reached its peak, Kofi appeared. But this was not the same man they knew. His face was pale. His hands trembled, and his eyes were wide with a fear that seemed to have settled deep within his bones. He looked, changed. Without a word, he unlocked his stall. But instead of setting out his scales and shouting prices, he did something that stunned the entire market into silence. He began giving his goods away. He handed sacks of grain to widows, gave fine cloth to the orphans, and pressed coins into the hands of the poor and the elderly. He worked tirelessly, not stopping until every last item, every last coin, was gone. From that day on, Kofi was a different man. The fear of the snake's return was a powerful motivator, but over time something else began to grow in its place. He saw the smiles on the faces of those he helped. He heard their words of gratitude. And for the first time in his life, Kofi understood a wealth far greater than gold. The story of Kofi and the serpent in the pot became a legend, a reminder whispered from one generation to the next. That greed may build a house of gold, but kindness builds a home in the hearts of others. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into folklore. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. See you next time.